Our neighbors tricked us into splitting huge dinner bills again and again, until one night we changed the rules and the math finally exposed them. Hit like, subscribe, and the bell. More crazy revenge stories are coming your way. We moved upstate and assumed we'd found the kind of neighbors you toast on front steps. Easy smiles, weekend waves, borrowed ladders returned with cookies. Across the road lived Joey and Linda, a chatty pair a dozen years older, suspiciously enthusiastic about grabbing dinner sometime. It sounded harmless. We were new, eager to belong, and their friendliness arrived prepackaged with restaurant recommendations. Friday night, we met them at a cozy Italian spot Joey wouldn't stop hyping. My wife ordered light water and a small pasta, and I picked a modest entree because I was driving. Joey and Linda landed like tourists at a buffet. Cocktails, separate appetizers, loaded mains, then dessert for the table. Laughter flowed. Stories stretched. The waiter set down a check the size of a paperback. Joey pushed it toward me with a grin that tried to look generous and said, "Easiest way is to split down the middle." I glanced at our side. No cocktails, no tower of calamari, no molten cake. Then at his smile already rehearsed. We paid anyway. Pride, politeness, panic. Pick one. They also shaved the tip to something that made the server's face fall, so we quietly bumped it up on the way out. In the car, my wife stared through the windshield and said, "That felt gross." She was right. It wasn't the money. It was the math they expected us to ignore. I told her next time we would pay only for what we ordered. I meant it the way people mean January gym plans, sincere, underprepared. 2 weeks later, Joey texted another invitation. All exclamation points and a winking emoji that smelled like déjà vu. Against our better judgment, we said yes, hoping the first night had been a misunderstanding. It wasn't. The pattern had a name, and we were learning it the expensive way. A couple weeks later, Joey proposed a scenic Hudson dinner. On the drive, I rehearsed a sentence that felt like flossing with wire. "We'll pay for what we order." Before menus hit the table, I pulled him aside and said it plainly. His eyebrows fused, as if fairness were a personal insult. "Yeah, sure, whatever," he muttered, the tone of a man denied a coupon. My wife and I kept it simple again. They performed abundance again. When the bill arrived, he tried the same old theater, half for everyone. No mention of 4 cocktails and 2 appetizers that never crossed our side of the breadbasket. I pushed back, careful and quiet, and we carved the total into something closer to true. He sulked. Linda practiced a brittle laugh. We tipped correctly and left with the sticky feeling you get from handshakes that last too long. In the parking lot, my wife said, "This is ridiculous." She wasn't angry. She was tired, and tireder still of watching me pretend patience was the same as boundaries. I promised again that we'd shut the store on this little hustle. Then Joey upped the ante. An invite to the Chart House, a place where the water glasses gleam and the check can buy a tire. We went anyway because we are human, and humans like to believe polished rooms come with polished manners. They don't. Joey ordered a cocktail that arrived in something between a vase and a planetarium. Linda built a small skyline out of appetizers. We stayed modest and watched the old play in a nicer theater. When the bill landed, he palmed it with that swaggering half-smile and pronounced the sacred words, "We'll split, right?" We did, against sense and spine. In the dark drive home, my wife said, "They're using us." A seed rooted right then. The next time I wouldn't argue. I would change the rules so the bill told the story all by itself. By the next invitation, I was done auditioning for the role of polite sucker. Joey called, voice bright with a new upscale spot he just had to show us. I agreed before he could over-explain. My wife gave me the side look couples use when the History Channel in your eyes runs a highlight reel. "Trust me," I said. "Tonight will be different." I spent the day writing speeches I'd never give, then realized I didn't need words at all. I needed logistics. At the host's stand, I asked quietly and kindly for separate checks. The waiter nodded like a man who'd seen this film and was happy to cue my scene. With that single adjustment, the night tilted. Joey ordered the way he breathes. Loudly. He christened the waiter buddy. Tried a joke that belonged to a decade we'd all fled. Waved toward appetizers for the table. That somehow stalled on their half. Linda matched him sip for sip, the kind of performative indulgence that only counts if someone else pays the applause. My wife and I each chose 1 entree and sipped water. I smiled through the pageant because I knew where the curtain would fall. Course after course paraded by. Steak gleaming with butter, pasta dense as mortgage paperwork, desserts with their own zip codes. Joey leaned back eventually, hand on stomach, ready for his favorite scene. The magnanimous push of the leather folder toward me, the line about keeping it easy. He didn't know the script had been rewritten backstage. The room smelled like charred lemon and good olive oil. A violinist in the corner sawed through standards while servers slid plates with the hush of stagehands. Outside the windows the river held the last smear of sunset. Inside, Joey narrated each bite like a cruise director. I kept my eyes soft, my answers shorter than his questions, and let the courses stack evidence on porcelain. When coffee menus appeared, I folded mine and waited for the reveal. The waiter arrived with a posture I recognized from good stagecraft. Neutral, precise, impossible to argue with. He set down not one folder but two. One in front of us. One in front of them. The tiniest beat of silence followed. A cymbal brushed. A soft click somewhere in the room. Joey blinked, then performed a chuckle meant to reset the scene. "Oh, must be a mistake. Just bring one," he said, casual as a shrug. "Not a mistake, sir," the waiter answered, voice kind enough to remove the sting. The gentleman asked for separate checks. Red found Joey's cheeks in 3 fast shades. Linda leaned in and opened their folder like it might hiss. Numbers stared back. Cocktails tall as vases, appetizers with scenic views, entrees that priced themselves. Our bill, tidy and unsurprising, sat on our side like a quiet witness. Joey's grin frayed. He pinched the leather as if pressure could compress totals. A joke died in his throat. My wife slid our card into our folder without ceremony. I tipped well because the service had been crisp and because generosity tastes better when it isn't coerced. The waiter collected our check with the same professionalism he'd used all night. He did not look at Joey, which somehow made it worse. Across the table Linda's smile collapsed into something thin. Joey cleared his throat and tried one last angle. We could still, do half for convenience. But the line sounded like an old voicemail in a new phone. "We're good," I said pleasantly, and meant it. In that small, ordinary moment the arrangement they'd relied on for months simply expired. He stared at the totals, hunting for a rounding error large enough to save face. The room carried on. A laugh at the next table, a clink of spoons against china, the violin taking a turn. For once Joey had no commentary to provide. He pressed his lips, signed with a hand that wasn't steady, and slid the folder back as if it might bite. The silence that followed tasted better than any dessert on their side of the table. Linda's fork hovered over a melting scoop. Joey's jaw worked like he was chewing a sentence he couldn't swallow. Our receipt returned. I signed, thanked the waiter by name, and stood. My wife touched my wrist under the edge of the table. A small electric yes, and we walked out into night air that felt a degree lighter. In the glass we passed I caught our reflections, not smug so much as relieved. 2 people stepping out of a script they hadn't auditioned for. Behind us the door hissed closed. Through it I could still see Joey bent over math that refused to love him back. In the lot we didn't gloat. We laughed once, the quiet kind you save for elevators and victories that don't need captions. Then drove home with windows down. For a couple of weeks the neighborhood practiced a new choreography. Waves from across the road grew shorter. Conversations stayed on weather and lawn heights. I thought maybe the lesson had landed and the schedule of tradition dinners would fade into a story we told at holidays. But people who hate losing don't retire. They rebrand. Joey shuffled back one sunny Saturday while I trimmed hedges, talked Yankees and humidity, and floated a line he tried to make casual. "We should do dinner again sometime. Keep the tradition." I smiled like a man reading a familiar plot twist and said we'd see about schedules. What I didn't say out loud was simple. If he insisted on a sequel, I was perfectly willing to run the same ending twice. A week later Linda cornered my wife at the mailbox, chirping about a new steakhouse on the river. Reservation already made, of course. That night we set terms at the kitchen table. Separate checks, modest orders, no subsidies. I called ahead. The host's "no problem" sounded like the voice of institutional memory. Game on. We walked into the steakhouse like people who had finally learned to label the drawer. The host stand glowed under a brass lamp. 2 couples, I said. And separate checks on both tables, noted up top, please. Already on the ticket, the host replied, tapping the screen. A blue banner winked. Split. No merge. At the table my wife whispered, "No speeches." I shook my head. Just settings. Joey arrived broadcasting confidence, cologne walking 3 steps ahead. "Buddy," he boomed to the waiter. "Start us with oysters for the table and 2 old fashions. For your check or theirs?" The waiter asked, pencil steady. "Ours," I said before Joey could rehearse generosity. He blinked, then laughed like he'd meant that all along. Linda ordered a tower of sides. We kept to one entree each and water that tasted like decision. The room ran on low light and sear, plates whispering as they landed. When our steaks arrived, Joey lifted his glass and tried to toast old friends, as if the line could turn arithmetic sentimental. To a fair night, I added, clinking gently. Near dessert he angled his chair and performed the old move, hand drifting toward the leather folder as if gravity liked him best. 2 folders touched down instead, one in front of each couple, the waiter's face professionally blank. Joey's mouth opened, ready to reframe the universe, but the top of his bill already told the truth. Across ours the numbers sat neat and unsurprising. Across his the cocktails sparkled like little debts. Easy, he said, testing a grin. We can still split half. We'll cover our own, thanks, I said, and the words tasted clean. In the lot my wife breathed in night air and said, that felt like a door closing. It did, but I still heard Joey rattling the handle on the other side. People who live on shortcuts don't quit at the first detour. They look for an alley. 2 nights later his text buzzed. New spot Tuesday. Don't be late. I answered, we'll join if they do separate checks. The dots appeared, vanished, returned. LOL sure, he wrote, winky face pasted over habit. The place was a brick and leather temple to truffle fries. Booths hugged you like a business deal. At the host stand I confirmed the note and added one more setting I'd learned from a catering friend. Would you pre-authorize both checks at the start? Keeps things smooth. Of course, the server said, sliding a tiny terminal that blinked like a polite lighthouse. Joey arrived narrating victories and ordered a round for the table. Only on ours, I said. The server's pencil paused, then moved. Dinners landed hot and loud. The room smelled like char and thyme. When the folders came, his face did the math and then the theater. He patted his jacket, tried 3 pockets, and delivered the classic line with a grin that asked the world to be generous. Wild, I forgot my card. The server didn't flinch. You're pre-authorized, sir. We can run that hold or take tap to pay. For once the grin broke. He stared at his phone like a magician whose hat had learned better. Linda chirped, will Venmo later? I shook my head. Tonight works. He found a card after all, one that moved through the reader like a reluctant confession. We tipped properly, thanked the staff, and stepped into night air that smelled like rain. Think that ends it? My wife asked. It ends the easy part, I said. People don't drop a favorite trick until it stops getting claps. She squeezed my hand. Somewhere behind us a dish clinked. Up ahead the sky held its breath. The sidewalk gleamed under streetlights. Tires whispered on wet pavement. A bus sighed at the corner like a tired animal. A week later he pivoted. Potluck at ours. Bring steaks and a good red, we'll handle sides. Translation. Supply the main event while they supplied plates. We arrived with 2 ribeyes wrapped by weight and a bottle we actually wanted to drink. Labels out because sometimes dignity travels on paper. The grill hissed. The yard smelled like cut grass and propane. A Bluetooth speaker pushed bass like it was paid by the thump. Joey waved tongs. Medium rare, right? Right? I said, and set a small note by the cooler with our names on it. Because lost bottles have a way of staying lost. Neighbors drifted through fairy lights. Kids chalked galaxies on the driveway. Linda ladled sides with a generosity that never quite reached the plates we brought. When the steaks landed, Joey carved theatrically and announced, look what we cooked for our friends. My wife smiled, gentle as a warning. You mean what we brought? She said, not unkind. He laughed too loudly and changed the subject. The food was fine. The company was mixed. The night smelled like lighter fluid and apologies unsaid. Next morning a Venmo request arrived from Joey for party costs, ice, propane, grill maintenance. An amount suspiciously close to the price of 2 ribeyes and a decent cab. I sent a request back for mains provided, itemized with weights and the bottle. He replied with a single question mark. I answered, happy to net out. 2 minutes later he paid, then canceled his own request as if the app had learned manners. That afternoon I shared a short guideline in the neighborhood thread. Potlucks are best when hosts cover the venue and guests bring a dish they choose. Receipts optional, but fairness isn't. 3 thumbs up landed instantly. The 4th was from a teacher who wrote, bless you. Joey stayed quiet. Silence, for once, was the only thing that fit. When the next idea arrived it wore confetti. Birthday dinner for Linda. Waterfront at 8. Let's make it special. The thread hummed. Half the block had paid tuition at the school of splitting. The other half had heard the syllabus. 12 of us gathered under slow lamps and a window that held the river like a mirror. The host smiled as if warned by angels. "Separate checks as noted," he said, setting place cards like chess pieces. Joey blinked, then rallied. "Appetizers for the table," he declared. For voices answered in polite unison, "Only on ours, thanks." The server nodded, pencil dancing. Linda announced, "The cake is a surprise. Just bring it at the end. We can only place it on checks for the people who eat it," the server said cheerfully. She faltered, then recovered into small talk about frosting. Dinners arrived with the soft clatter of a well-drilled crew. The room smelled like lemon and grill smoke. A pianist in the corner found a melody nobody had to forgive. Across 2 hours, the conversation loosened. People compared hiking trails, babysitters, and home repair disasters. Laughter stacked in layers until it felt like insulation. When the checks landed, each bore a neat total and a printed line that read service 20% included. House policy. Parties 6+. Joey tried a late pivot. "We can still even it out, right?" I said. "We just did." He swallowed and signed. Linda held the pen a second too long, then asked the server, "Do people really do it this way now?" "It keeps friendships friendly," he said, sliding a candle onto a plate. We sang. She blushed in the right places. Joey clapped offbeat. On the way out, 3 neighbors thanked the staff by name, and the staff thanked them back like a new ritual had been learned. Out in the lot, I heard someone say, "Why didn't we do this a year ago?" And nobody had a good answer. After that, their invitations arrived wearing smaller shoes. "Drinks on the porch?" Replaced rooms with receipts. "We're making chili?" Bring nothing. Replaced menus engineered for arithmetic. We said yes when it felt neighborly and no when it smelled like a rebrand. One evening, we passed the Italian place where the hustle had started. I held the door for a server with a tray balanced like a magic trick. She grinned. "Separate checks tonight?" "Always," I said. And she laughed the laugh of someone whose rent depends on small fairnesses. Inside, we kept it simple. Split a salad, shared a pasta, and tipped like adults who remember working Saturdays. The music was soft, garlic warm in the air. The tabletop clean as a fresh page. My wife tapped my wrist. "Worth the trouble? Worth the lesson," I said. Back home, the neighborhood found an easier rhythm. The group chat traded tool recommendations and babysitter numbers instead of screenshots of mysterious Venmo requests. Linda waved from across the street with a smile that stayed inside its lane. Joey tried once more. "Tradition dinner soon?" And I answered with a friendly boundary. "Happy to, separate checks as usual." He sent a thumbs up, then nothing. Sometimes victory is a new default no one argues with. I printed a small note and taped it inside our pantry door for the days I'm tempted to buy peace. Pay for what you eat, tip for what they do, smile for what lasts. On quiet nights, our block smells like charcoal and lilacs. Porch lights click on. Somewhere a mower backfires and then gives up. We sit on the steps and talk about normal things. Paint colors, the stubborn maple, the first time we felt like this place was ours. The math takes care of itself now, which is another way of saying the story does too. Sometimes the fairest revenge is fairness itself. Clear rules, clean math, no drama. What would you have done? Argue at the table or change the defaults? Like, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next story.